So we're going to work up toward the planche first. I'm going to show you that, and then we'll talk about the chin up. So the planche is a really weird one. And if you're coming from a fitness background or a background where there's not much specifically gymnastic strength, then it's going to be unfamiliar. It was very unfamiliar for me. It was a weird one to learn, but once I learned it, it was maybe one of the more potent aspects of my strength practice. And the reason why was because most of us have never practiced strength with a straight arm position other than a plank. So this really set the next level to building this connection in the scapula and tying it in and integrating it in with the abdominals and the hips. And like I said, if you don't ever want to do a press handstand or some of those skills, no big deal. But having ownership of the planche is going to transcend into other layers of practice that will allow you to express more deeply. So the planche is a counterbalance. This is the thing that took me a while to figure out. There needs to be this travel in the wrist, this ability for the shoulder to go forward while keeping a locked elbow so that I can counter my head with my hips. So just to kind of give you an example of what the planche is all about, what it looks like, I'm going to start in this tucked position here with my hands directly underneath the shoulders, leaning forward. This is the counterbalance, keeping the elbows locked. I'm going to lift the hips up in space and get as high as I can. Typically here, people end up keeping the hips too low, and the hips in that low position don't allow for a connection through the shoulder. So that ends up being something that doesn't quite get into the scapula, into this lower kind of trap lower back area, and limits their progress. It ends up looking something like this, which is not a planche. The hips are way too low here. I don't actually get this integration through the abdominals. So now most people can't do this starting out. So I'm going to show you the progression to build up to that, and we'll talk about some of the options to support progress. Option one, variation one, would be a plank. And I would encourage, even if you can do a planche, go back to the plank, feel it out, understand where the possible limitations are, and then work up from there. So the basic plank we're going to do is a protracted plank. So we talked about protraction here being this forward position. We also already talked about this locked elbow and stacked wrist position. So we're going to get into our plank, stacking everything, keeping the elbow pits forward, and then we're going to grow tall through the upper back, protracted. And don't let the shoulders come up around the ears, keep them back and down. And then I'm going to pull the abdominals in as I tuck the pelvis under. I want to do that without lifting the pelvis. Abdominals are in, I'm growing tall, finding this rooted connection in the hands. So the first place there is, can I do 60 seconds for multiple sets, 3, 4, 5 sets? If that feels okay, I'm going to start to send the shoulders forward and do a bit of a plank lean, pushing with the toes, but all while not losing that protracted position. So you'll notice as you go forward, it's going to require more strength. And if you don't have it in the scapula, you're going to sag the chest. So that's one thing to pick up on. If I can hold that, the next layer would be to tuck the toes under so that they're on top of the floor and to maintain that protracted position. Cool. So if that's good for you, those are 3 distinct options: plank, plank lean with the toes, top of the toes under. I want to build up to 60 seconds in all 3 of those before I move forward into the next variation. This will build tolerance in the wrist because it's going to take time, 9 to 12 months, for this ligamentous tissue in the wrist and the forearm to adapt. So for most of us not having done gymnastic work in the past or leveraged work like this, it's going to take a while for these to actually adapt to the load that we're asking. So this will be part of that adaptation. Now, let's say I can do that fine. We typically go ahead and allow people to move into a banded planche. So the banded planche would be taking a resistance band, and I can actually help you I'll send a list of some available equipment options for those that are interested in some of the ones that we use. You by no means have to use them, but things like rings, bands, et cetera. I get a lot of questions about what the best resource for some of these are. I'll send a list to you guys so that you can access that on your own. But this is just a simple band, get it from Rogue. And with this band, we're gonna either hook it onto a bar or hook it onto the rings to support our planche. So in this case, if we think about managing load and leverage, then we want to think about the fact that we need to take weight out of the feet, out of the hips, so that we can lift ourselves in space. So I'm going to take an anchor point, in this case, the rings, and I'm going to support the feet underneath that anchor point. Now, a couple of things that I need to know here are the height of the anchor point is going to make the band a little bit more of an assist, and then obviously the tension of the band. So whatever I start with and I'm able to do, I want to make sure that it's repeatable. So in this case, I have the top of the ring is almost at the top of the forehead. So I know, okay, I can set it up there every time. And I'm using a blue band. So simple as that. So I'm going to take the band in a triangle and pull it across the shin as I bring the knees down in front. So now the band is underneath the anchor point. It's across my ankles. So think about the leverage. The further the band is behind me, the more assist it's going to be. The more it comes up towards center, let's say I put it around my waist, the harder it's going to be. So that's a cue for progression. I can go from ankles to hip. So from here, again, I'm going to place the hands a little wider than the shoulders. I can turn the hands out a little bit if I need to. Protract, it's best to protract starting the movement, because once you start it, there's going to be no way for you to get it back. I need to go in solidified. I'm going to lean forward and allow the band to do the work to help lift me up. Now you notice my hips are just a little bit higher than my shoulders here versus something like this. So I want to push up as I send the head and the shoulders forward. Okay, so this is the banded planche. We're looking for about a 15-second hold here. So it's not, 5 or 8 seconds. It's a good 15-second hold before we attempt to either reduce the band, reduce the height of the assistance, or change altogether to a freestanding planche. Couple notes here: when you first use the band, there's going to be a lot of bounciness. Part of that is the shoulder learning the coordination of the movement, but over time you'll feel how and where to solidify it so that you're not moving all over the place. Okay, so this would be our main straight arm push, and like I said before, this is going to lead or transcend into things like press handstand and other pressing strength. It could even be something like floor locomotion, doing crabs, and some of these things that we've done in the past that require this push